Hi, everyone. Welcome to Commissioner Wilson's virtual office hours. I am so thrilled to be taking this virtual office hour week off-road a little bit. We're not going to talk too much about weekly updates. Today, we have a special guest from the Sierra Club, Miss Cris Costello. Hello, welcome.
Hey there.
I'm so honored because you know that I myself am a diehard environmentalist, and Commissioner Wilson is an environmental lawyer. And there's just so much that is going on across the state. And I feel like when things come here, like the fertilizer ordinance, for example, Sierra Club is right on it. And someone has to be behind the curtain organizing and planning and kind of making sure that your message is so well researched, data driven, and astute and organized, clear and concise. And so I have a feeling that a lot of that incredible work is thanks to you. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell our audience about your background.
Oh, wow. Well, I've been at this a long time, so I have a lot of background. So cut me off when you need to.
Dive in. We're excited to meet you.
My name is Cris Costello. I'm a senior organizing manager for Sierra Club, Florida. I've been with the club since 2007. So in May, I will hit my 15th year, if I can do math right. I've worked on a number of campaigns since my start with the Sierra Club, but I am currently working on, I manage the Red Tide campaign, which is an overall nutrient pollution water quality campaign statewide. The Wildlands campaign, which is dedicated to land conservation. The Stop the Pre-Harvest Sugar Field Burning campaign. That is the campaign to end the toxic, racist, outdated practice of burning 400,000 or so acres of sugarcane fields every year in South Florida, and the Everglades Restoration campaign. And the Everglades Restoration campaign with the club has been going, we've had Everglades Restoration campaign for well over 20, 25, 30 years. So, so that's what I do now. We have 3 full-time organizers that I work with, and we are actually in the process of hiring another in North Florida. So if anyone's interested in applying for a Sierra Club organizer position, let me know. You can look online. Then background. So I've been with the club for about 15 years. Prior to the Sierra Club, I was in the labor movement. I was started out as a union organizer in 1990 and left the labor movement in 2007. So for 17 years, I went from being a union organizer to a contract negotiator and an arbitration and negotiation specialist. That was an incredible experience. I loved the labor movement. It was the kind of experience that really teaches you how to stay in the ring, keep on fighting. Before that, though, I was a grassroots community organizer. I worked for Acorn and any number of places. And I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Honduras for a couple of years from 1986 to 89. So I have been a troublemaker my entire adult life. I started my organizing career when I was in college. Actually, I started in 1983. So anyway, it's been a long time. It's a good job if you can get it. And that's just generally my background.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. You know, as someone who's so influential, so connected, and so motivated to work on all these different campaigns, you know, I'm sure it can be hard work emotionally because you're kind of on the front lines of a lot of information that people try really hard not to pay attention to because it is hard, it's heavy work. How do you find inspiration and how do you channel that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I just like a good fight. I have always liked a good fight, where someone is marginalized or disenfranchised or voiceless in some way. I just want to be in the thick of things. And so that's what made it easy for me to go from grassroots community organizing to the labor movement to the environmental movement, because you always have a big bad somebody who is taking advantage of people or places or creatures. And you need an organizer, you need a good organizer to be a resource, to develop leadership and build power against whoever, whatever it is. So in the labor movement, it was, bad employers. In the grassroots community situation, it could be any number of things. It could be an unresponsive police force or a local government that is ignoring a particular neighborhood, but there's some kind of bad operator. And in the environmental movement, we have way too many bad operators. It can be an agency like the Department of Environmental Protection that is really just fallen asleep on the job or worse, or it can be a powerful industry like Big Sugar. Unfortunately, I have a lot of job security because there are a lot of bad actors out there. But I like a good fight, and I just I don't know why I don't get burnt out. I think it's like for me, you can't win unless you stay in the ring. You got to keep on swinging, and so I do. I don't want to lose. I like a good fight, and I want to win. And if you quit, I mean, sometimes it's nice to have a vacation. I love vacations. But if you're going to win, you gotta stay in the fight.
Absolutely.
Lots of good fights out there to get involved with. The environment certainly isn't the only one. My life, my adult life experience shows that lots of good fights out there.
Right.
And if you like a good fight, there's plenty to choose from.
And I got to say, just reading your bio, it's incredible, because I hear so many people say, well, I'm just one person. What do I matter? What one vote or one act, what do I matter? And reading just you, one person, reading your bio, it's incredible what you've been able to accomplish as one individual.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's not just me. It's me and the collective that I work with, right? So one individual as part of a collective there's nothing more powerful. So yeah, it's never just me. I don't do anything alone. It's all teamwork. It's either a team of staff people or a team of staff and volunteers, or a team that is huge, that is, 4 counties worth of people fighting a toll road. It's always a team effort. Nobody does anything by themselves. And that's the glory of it, right? So you don't feel alone. You can't feel alone. You shouldn't feel alone, because we're all in it together.
Exactly. So tell me a little bit about your childhood. What were some of the first experiences that you had with nature to make you kind of fall in love with it enough to make it a career choice?
Well, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and we were lucky back then because we didn't have a lot of distractions. I was one of those kids, and I wasn't strange. All of us, we left house in the morning when it was the weekend or during the summer, and we didn't even want to get close to home in case our mothers would pull us in and make us stay indoors. So we were outside from almost dawn to dusk, and kick the can at night after nightfall, catching fireflies. I grew up in central Illinois. So whether it was the summer or it was the winter, when we were growing up in the snow and cold, we would be playing outside at least in temperatures of 20 degrees and above. 19 was kind of too cold to stay out too long, but 20 degrees and above, we were outside. So I think being outside and loving the outdoors just came naturally, because that's how I spent my time as a child. As a Peace Corps volunteer, I lived in a community, a small village that had no electricity and no running water. And I lived there for 2 years. So now my house was made of dirt with a thatched roof, with no screens. I was pretty much living outdoors for 2 years. And lucky for me, I like insects and snakes and every kind of creature there is. And that really solidified my love of the outdoors. I have never been happier, never had a happier living situation than that. And again, that was without electricity and running water. It was hot, obviously, and buggy, but living that close to nature is a real treat. It's a real gift that I got for 2+ years. And so if I didn't love the outdoors before then, when I left Honduras, I was solidly interested in being outdoors and protecting the outdoors as much as possible. I did it in my volunteer time before I started work with the Sierra Club, and then it became a full-time job.
So maybe just before we start going into kind of the work that you're doing now, what was the transition like going from a very natural space into a built human environment again? What was that like?
Horrible. It was
really? Did you have like grief, like from losing that connectedness to nature?
What it was overstimulation. I think what I remember most is just the overstimulation of the built out environment. When you are planning your nighttime excursions by the moon, by the phases of the moon, and you're shopping in a tienda, in a little shop that has maybe one, if maximum 2 choices of whatever you're there to buy, and having no cars. Very few people even had bikes, actually, where I was. You walked everywhere. That is so simple. It's just so simple that you have a lot of time to think and be who you are. You get to the built out environment and there are too many choices. There's so many choices and you're so overstimulated. And I think probably the worst part of the transition was it's harder to get anything done here. Lots of red tape, lots of bureaucracy, lots of political crap, for lack of a better word. And when you're in the middle of, what most people would call the middle of nowhere, working with people, and you have what you have, and what you don't have, you figure out ways to get things done. So it's much easier to be productive in that kind of situation. And that was a hard transition. But, shopping for a shampoo or, things like that was just seriously daunting. But, if you want to get used to something, you do. And so I got used to it again. It doesn't mean, though, that I don't relish returning to that kind of life someday. I don't know if that'll ever be possible, but I would love to.
You're the first person that I've met who has been able to speak words to something that I feel like I've felt since a little girl, of this alarm when I'm in places like I was in today. I went to Sam's Club to help a constituent purchase some items for an event. And I can't just focus on the moment. I'm looking at so much resources that have been put into every piece of everything that's there, and realizing that there's so many Sam's Clubs, there's so many Walmarts, there's so many Costco's, and that we are just sucking resources and just putting them into things. It really just it alarms me. And I've never really been able to meet as many people, even in the work that I do, that have been able to have that experience where they feel that shock because they're so used to it. They were born and raised to have options and to have that stimuli constantly being poured into their day-to-day process. And so it's an experience. I can only imagine how peaceful and beautiful it must have been to just be in pure darkness or, you know, uh, pure woods constantly for 2 years, forests of
Yeah, you
silence.
can't, it was extraordinary. My mother, who is not an outdoors person, came to visit me, and we were in bed one night in my home, and she said, "Cris, I thought there wasn't any electricity or anything around here." And I said, "There isn't." And she said, "I hear a really loud factory. What is that?" And I said, "That's the insects." That's the insects making noise and the frogs making noise. And she was gobsmacked. If you're going to be, if your ears are going to hear something at night, let it be the chirp of insects and frogs, and
Right.
not traffic zooming by, right? So
Mhm.
it's not like the outdoors is devoid of stimulation. It's just different. It's slower. It's sweeter. And it's closer. Well, obviously, it's nature, right? So it's closer to whatever our essential beings are. Yeah, yeah. My mom and I joke about that all the time. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue into the work that you're doing here in Florida, because if you are living and functioning here, then you must feel what I feel when I walk down a suburban road, which is like the apocalypse. I don't see bugs flying around lights anymore. I don't hear things as much as I used to as a kid at night. And that to me is a warning that something's very wrong. Um, and it's becoming more and more common. So, maybe tell us a little bit about the environmental work that you're focusing on here in Florida.
Sure, sure. So I'll start with the clean water work. Um, our campaign, it's since 2006, we've had a red tide campaign. It's not only devoted to red tide. That's just what we've called our campaign. It started because of the red tide outbreak in 2005, 2006. But our water quality work is focused on nutrient pollution. So fertilizer, manure, and sewage. Not very sexy topics of conversation, but seriously important things to pay attention to. The basis of our campaign, and really everything we do, is stop pollution at its source. Stop sewage, manure, and fertilizer pollution at its source so that it doesn't get into the waterways and then fuel harmful algal blooms like cyanobacteria, blue-green algae, or red tide, or brown tide. Depending on where you live in Florida, you may have a different toxic or nuisance algae bothering you, but it is all because we are not stopping pollution at its source. Unfortunately, Governor DeSantis and Rick Scott before him have focused on, if anything, greenwashing the conversation. So if you talk about it, you must be doing something about it. But focusing on control and mitigation of harmful algal blooms. So once they hit, then how do we dose it with some chemical or harvest it or whatever to make it go away? But that's not the answer. That's the opposite of stopping pollution at its source, right? It's much less expensive to stop pollution at its source than to have the water get polluted and then pay for the cleanup. And literally, paying for the cleanup is just a never-ending treadmill. It's a treadmill. We will never get off the cleanup treadmill if we don't stop pollution at its source. So our work relates to stopping pollution at its source for the last almost 15 years. Even a couple of months before I started, we started getting urban fertilizer ordinances passed around the state, strict, no exemption, rainy season ban urban fertilizer ordinances. We're now at well over 100, I think 110 municipalities and 17 counties. It is a way, really cheap way to stop urban fertilizer at its source. It's not an end to all urban fertilizer, it's just putting it down at the right time of the year and the right rate and the right kind to stop pollution and stop the excessive flow. We also are involved in fairly to no avail, trying to get the Department of Agriculture and the agricultural industry in general to be regulated or regulate itself. Agricultural fertilizer is a huge source of nutrient pollution, nitrogen and phosphorus pollution in the state, and they are not regulated really in any way, shape, or form. And then there's sewage, wastewater management upgrades are needed around the state in any number, if not probably many or most cities and counties. We have aged systems. So that's the water quality work. We do it at the local level. That's where we're most successful. Local governments tend not to be partisan, tend not to think about anything but protecting the basis of their economic engine, and the environment for most, if not all of Florida is the environment. And so we have a lot of luck at the local level. At the state level, we have not had luck. The legislature is really for now about 10 years. We've really had no luck in stopping bad legislation or getting good legislation passed. And the last two governors have been abysmal in that sense. The thing is that the environment shouldn't be a partisan issue. It can't be a partisan issue. We all breathe the air and swim in the water and drink water, and it can't be a partisan issue. And unfortunately, we fall into partisanship when we're talking about the environment. But that is not the way to go. If I had my druthers, we would not be talking in any way partisan. It would be about what is best for all of us. And I hope that someday the environment stops being a partisan issue. I'm not naive. I understand that there are some issues that will always be partisan because of the difference of the parties, but the environment is not one of them. And so I'm getting a little bit off track. But anyway, we have to find a nonpartisan way to address our environmental threats and the future for our children. So that's water quality. Conservation land is an easy one. My understanding, don't quote me on this because I could be wrong, but I heard from a trusted source that more or less other states of the nation are between 3 and 8% developed. The land of the particular state is between 3 and 8% developed. In Florida, we're at 20%. And so we are already overdeveloped in respect to the balance between development and the preservation of the natural resources that allow us to continue to live in the state. There is no way to separate the connection between conserving land, whether it's wetlands or highlands or the Everglades. There's no way to separate that from flood attenuation, the quality of our drinking water, the quality of our surface waters and coastal waters. The land in Florida is the kidney for our water resources. And the more land that we destroy and develop, the more floods we will have, the lower water quality we will have, the less quantity of water we will have. And of course, the worse the air quality will be. And it's all wrapped up in climate change, because the more development you have, the more fossil fuel infrastructure you have, the more impervious surfaces you have, the more heat centers you have, the worse it is for the climate. I'm not one of those people that says, let yesterday's transplant be the last person that comes to Florida. That's not realistic. There are ways to develop that do not destroy additional acres of really critical wetlands and conservation lands. And we just have to develop right. So land conservation is something that is very, very important to the Sierra Club. Back in 2014, we passed the state of Florida voters passed by 75% constitutional amendment devoting large sums of money from documentary stamp taxes to land acquisition, created the Land Acquisition Trust Fund. This fiscal year, for the 22-23 fiscal year, there was $1 billion in that trust fund to use for conservation land. And what does the legislature do? They spend 100 million, 130 million, maybe even 300 million in a year or so, a couple of years ago or this year. But that's nothing to the 1 billion, and the rest of the money they misappropriate. So Floridians made a decision. We have the dollars to spend on land acquisition, but the legislature has not implemented that constitutional amendment in the way it should be. And the Sierra Club is still fighting that in court, and we will until the very end. And then we'll find some other way to fight it, because land conservation, again, is inextricably tied to the ability for us to continue to live in Florida. It just is. It's
right.
Very irrefutable science.
Right. And there's so many places all across the state that are all across the country that are running out of water. And I know that even St. John's Water Management District has openly admitted to have over permitted. And if we're at that place where we're going to have to start finding alternative potable water resources, then we need to have an honest conversation about how we grow and where. And unfortunately, I don't think that, the planning process, like there was a time when every county had to send their comprehensive plan up to the state for approval, and that's just not being monitored anymore. And we can't, we're preempted from so many things, but we're preempted from doing like a building moratorium until we can catch up with what's going on. We can really make sure we have adequate aquifer recharge taking place. The growth is just happening on such an exponential level that I don't think we're catching up to be able to truly determine if we're in trouble. And yet, you get so many blanketed answers and you're not really hearing, solutions for some of these problems. And then simultaneously to that, to segue into the No Roads to Ruin Coalition, you're seeing that some of our Florida Forever sites are being kind of attacked for interchange extensions and expressways to come in and just basically facilitate more urban sprawl. Maybe talk a little bit about your work trying to combat those issues.
Sure. So our No Roads to Ruin Coalition, that work is very much under both the water quality and the wildlands campaigns, because again, you can't separate them. The No Roads to Ruin campaign is a campaign that started in 2019 when legislation was passed that proposed 3 new tollways stretching from Naples all the way to Georgia. And in the 2021 legislative session, one of those toll roads was taken off the list. We had a momentary victory of getting the southernmost toll road out of the plan. We are still fighting 2 of those toll road threats. One is the extension of the Northern Turnpike. So Wildwood is where the Florida Turnpike ends right now. One of those, the northern extension, would extend northward somewhere from Wildwood and connect with US 19, various routes. The other threat is the expansion of US 19 after where the Suncoast Parkway ends. That is a little less solid, more amorphous. It could be a tollway. It could just be lane expansions. We don't know. But the campaign is devoted to stopping new toll roads. One of our famous pink signs is rural Florida says no new toll roads. The issue is not just more fossil fuel infrastructure, which we don't need here in Florida, but it really is about the preservation of a part of Florida that is as pristine as you can get in Florida. It is rural Florida. It is farmland in Florida. It is people living in Sumter, Citrus, Levy, and Marion counties who want to live there because of the way of life, whether it's the farm way of life or the ranch way of life or the horse farm way of life or just small town way of life. This is another fight that is not partisan at all. Our coalition partners range from hardcore, hippie, the hippiest of hippie environmentalists to airboat company operators and horse farmers, small business people in the smallest of rural conservative towns in those counties. It is a great coalition of strange bedfellows, all devoted to one thing: stopping these new, absolutely unneeded roads. Of course, developers are salivating to get their hands on every last piece of land. Unfortunately, toll roads don't funnel business into small towns. They keep the traffic running right by those small towns. So there's nothing in these toll roads for small town North Florida. We've had a tremendous uprising of people in these 4 counties that just don't want this and are fighting back hard. We can win this fight. We're just going to continue to organize, one town at a time, one farm at a time, we will win because of that collective. We were talking before about, one person doesn't do anything. It really is the collective. And we have a very large collective now, and we plan to grow it even larger. So that's very current work. We're in the thick of things right now.
Which is why, the work that you do is so important. I just feel like some people don't even know where to start. They don't even know how to organize their community, what the rules are. It can be very frustrating. And for the people that I have met who have been going up against these big developers or toll roads, they have to kind of dedicate a large portion of their life to it in order to successfully mobilize and shut down whatever efforts are being organized on the corporate end. And then also, they might even have to fundraise for lawyers, and it just becomes such a battle that without Sierra Club, I feel like it would be a losing battle to a certain degree, because you all have the at least some of the capacity and bandwidth to kind of target the most crucial issues. but it really feels like uh, everything's happening all at once. I told you earlier that it feels like the legislature right now in Florida state level is just a dumpster fire because it's constant. It's fire hosing. It's let's do everything all at once and inundate people so that they feel bogged down and overwhelmed and that they can't organize. Because if you're an environmentalist right now, you're looking at every direction and like, where do I prioritize my time?
Yeah, I mean, there are all kinds of ways that I might kind of respond to that, but I think the most productive way to respond is to say that there is advocacy, right? There are a lot of organizations that are great advocates. They have their staff people or volunteers, and they go to public meetings and they say they're very well researched opinions and positions. And it would be great if, but it isn't enough because advocacy only goes so far. And truthfully, over the last decade, many of us feel that it's an advocacy treadmill. You're constantly putting in public comments and going to public meetings, but the environmentalist point of view is ignored and the industry always wins.
Right.
And so advocacy is great, it's important, and there are a lot of organizations that do really good advocacy work. I think the question, the difference perhaps between the Sierra Club and other organizations, large organizations, is that we mobilize the grassroots. Our reason for being is to build power, not just advocate, but build power, build grassroots power, and build a movement so that it isn't just 3 advocates going to a public meeting, but there are 1,000 people going to a public meeting. And those 1,000 people that are educated and informed and passionate and ready to fight are also voters. So it's about getting more people involved because a few people can't win this fight. Big Sugar is too powerful for advocacy alone to win. As an example, we have to build a movement of people that understand, and so education is a big part of it, and are engaged and own the fight. When you don't own a fight, you can let somebody else take care of it. You have to own it. And the closer we get to kind of daily, weekly impacts from sea level rise and the climate impacts, the weather changes, the more people will own the problem because they'll be in the thick of it. We don't want to wait that long though. And so we knock on doors and we talk to people in an unbranded way. This isn't about the Sierra Club. It's about giving resources to frontline communities, the people that are most impacted by these environmental threats, giving them the resources and the tools and the inspiration to get in the fight also, right? And do things the way they think. I'm from Sarasota. I can't represent someone who lives in Levy County like someone who lives in Levy County can represent themselves. Right. And so my job is to help the Levy County folks rise up and fight back instead of me doing it or some other organizer doing it.
Right. And also provide data and
everything
ordinance language from other counties and
right.
Support that hold a lot of clout when you're trying to go up against whatever battle. So that's all really great. Let's talk a little bit about some of these bills that are at the state. I'm still learning, and it seems as though every day on the news there's something else. So I would say maybe you want to start talking about some of the most pressing to make note of.
Sure. Shall I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Great. So, okay. So I think, so the legislative session is over. It ended on the 14th of March. It was supposed to end on the 11th. It was extended a day. I'm not going to talk about the special session, but I can mention that in a few minutes. The legislative session is 60 days long. It was 61 days, I guess, this time. The Sierra Club only has so many people and so many folks on staff and lobbyists. We tracked about 160 bills. I think there was something like 2,500 bills that were filed, maybe more. That number seems to be in my head. But we tracked about 160 of them. We focused on only a very few. Sometimes it's hard to choose, but we chose bills to really put our effort into that we thought really would be the most horrible if they passed, but also had a chance of getting beaten or winning. We were wrong in most cases, but I'm just going to cover just a couple. There are many more, but if you have questions about others, I can answer those. Some of the bad bills that passed and were sent to the governor, there are lots of them, but I'm going to focus on two right now because neither of them have been sent to the governor yet. So they haven't been signed by the governor, and we still have time to mobilize people to ask for a veto. So at the end, I think you can see on my screen the phone number. Can you see the phone number? So for those watching, the phone number to the governor's office is 850-717-9337. And there are a couple of bills that I would encourage people to make those calls. Really simple. That's really all you have to say. Veto this bill. You don't have to go into lots of reasons. You can, but you don't have to. So the first is the net metering bill, HB 741. This one is especially egregious because there are only so many things that regular Floridians can do to combat climate change, to stop greenhouse gases from escaping from our man-made world into the atmosphere. And rooftop solar is one of them. HB 741 would effectively discourage rooftop solar. Rooftop solar is a nascent industry. It is just started to get going in Florida. And rooftop solar is one way to create solar power. There are the large solar photovoltaic arrays that big utilities have. They make energy from the sun and they send it to us as ratepayers, and we pay for the energy. We pay for the electricity, whether it's solar made by solar power or produced by coal. We pay for it. Rooftop solar is made, it's energy from the sun, but it's on your roof, so you don't have to pay for it, but you have to pay for the photovoltaic panels, the solar panels on your roof. And the reason this bill is so bad is that it makes it harder to afford solar panels, putting solar panels and using solar panels on your own home. This is a bill that will only benefit the utilities and their shareholders. And what it does is it changes things. Right now, homeowners that have solar panels get a 1-to-1 credit towards their power bill for each kilowatt hour that they send to the grid. So if you pay X amount of dollars for X amount of energy, but you create that X amount of energy from your rooftop solar, you get to sell it back to the utility. And it's a 1-for-1 credit. You spend as much as you pay for. No, you spend as much as you earn. This bill starts on January 2024, and that credit will no longer be 1-to-1. And so instead of getting money back for the money that you pay into the grid, which then you can use to pay off your solar panels, you'll get less. First, the credit will be cut to 75%. That's from 2024 and 2025. Starting in 2026, the credit will be reduced to 60%. And for all of 27 and 28, it'll go to 50%. Then starting in January 2029, it'll be cut to something like 20 or 25%. So you as an energy producer in your home, you're not going to get your money's worth. The problem with that is that only the wealthier people will be able to afford the investment to put on solar panels, which is the absolute opposite of what we need to do as a society. We need to make solar energy production more accessible to lower, middle, and lower income people. It shouldn't just be the wealthy people that get the benefits of solar energy. And so this is a horrible, horrible bill. At this moment, as of noon today, 12:27 today, the bill had not been sent to the governor. So I would ask all your listeners to call 850-717-9337 and ask the governor to veto HB 741. Simple as that. That's a horrible bill that we really need the governor to veto.
I just want to say that there's such a double standard when the right to clean water charter amendment was going through here in Orange County, and how big corporations were basically trying to say this is going to kill jobs. And then you see a bill like this that is directly going to correlate to jobs lost. It is such a double standard, and I have no idea why they think that this is going to help them in the long run with their, pro-business appeal to their constituencies.
Yeah, if you could, I feel like I have steam coming out of my ears. It enrages me like it enrages a lot of people. It makes no sense. It's certainly not pro-jobs. It's not pro-small business. It's anti-small business.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Another truly, truly horrific bill is Senate Bill 620. It's called the Local Business Protection Act, but we call it the Super Preemption Bill. It's somewhat like the Burt-Harris Act. If any of your listeners are familiar with the Burt-Harris Act, this bill will chill the creation, the development, the passage of ordinances that are good for people at the local level. Because what the bill does is it creates a cause of action for a legal claim of business damages if a local government, a county or a city or a town adopts or amends or an ordinance or a charter provision in any way that will cause a reduction of 15% of a business's profits on a per location business within that locality's jurisdiction. The claim of lost revenues can be made before the business loses a dime. And so they don't have to prove that they did lose money or they have lost money. And it is, if you can imagine, any ordinance that is good for the constituency, an ordinance, a noise ordinance or
like
a
the fertilizer
water
ordinance, like
fertilizer ordinances.
We've had so many staff dollars, like your tax dollars that went into staff time, writing the language, our time, talking about it on the dais with Commissioner Wilson, all the resources that went into passing a decent fertilizer ordinance could now go out the window if landscaping companies wanted to challenge that and say, this is going to hurt my bottom line.
Right. And it's, there's no due diligence necessary, right? It's a claim. You can make a claim, and especially smaller communities, towns and cities that don't have huge budgets. If a company says, well, you can't pass that ordinance because it's going to cost me money, even if they're making money polluting the economic engine of that community, it doesn't matter why they would lose money or how they would lose money. It's just if they lose money. It's imaginable that a local government would say, well, we're not even going to start. We're not even going to start talking about an ordinance to stop this pollution or stop this noise or stop this nuisance or whatever it is, because a business could lose money. It's unthinkable. Really, this bill is just, it's an extraordinarily foolish piece of legislation that can tie the hands of local government from protecting their own constituents. It is an abasement of anything that you can think of that relates to local government's role of protecting its citizens, its residents, and its visitors. Florida Tax Watch estimates that it'll cost local governments over $900 million each year. And when you think of local governments not having enough money anyway to do what they need to do, that's a tragedy. The sick funny thing is that the bill provides that a locality can cure the ordinance or charter by amending it to remove the cause of the 15% reduction in profits, repeal it, or grant a waiver from it. But there's no opportunity for the locality to demonstrate the legitimacy of the ordinance or of a charter provision. So there's no place in the bill to give the government a chance to say, hey, wait a second, right? You may lose business, but it's important that we do this because. There's no place for them to say the because. It's extraordinarily horrible. So I will stop there. I would ask all of your listeners, anyone watching this, to call 850-717-9337 and ask the governor to veto Senate Bill 620. That's Senate Bill 620. I think we'll stop there. We're getting pretty close to the hour.
Yeah, maybe just do a couple bullet points of like some others to keep an eye on.
Oh, let's see. Look, I'm actually going to give some good news, a little good news.
Yeah, we like good news.
There were two good bills that passed that were sent to the governor. He has yet to sign them. One is that the tree trimming and tree removal statute there were really good rules about who could cut down trees and prune away trees years ago. The law was gutted several years ago, and this year some of the gutted parts were brought back. So it's going to be a little less hard to topple trees and prune down trees. So that was a good bill. The other good one, for a number of different reasons, is the regulation of smoking by counties and municipalities. Years ago, cities and counties could regulate smoking on beaches, in public parks, et cetera. And then that was preempted. That was taken away from them. This bill, HB 105, reauthorizes counties and municipalities to restrict smoking on beaches and parks, with one exemption. The exception is unfiltered cigars. The reason for that is that it's the filter in the cigarette that takes forever to break down, and unfiltered cigars don't have those. But if you're really happy about this bill because you can't stand cigars being smoked on the beach, well, then this isn't going to fix it for you. But environmentally, it's a good bill. We hope to see local governments starting to restrict smoking on public beaches and public parks. And let's see, what's another one? Here's one I'd like to, maybe we'll finish with couple of them. The heat illness prevention bill, SB 732, died. It's died for several legislative sessions in a row. This is a horrible, horrible thing that the legislature has done. We have so many people who work out in the heat in Florida, And you live in Florida for a very short amount of time, and you know how hot it is in the summer and how hard it is to work outside in the summer. The bill that would have protected outdoor workers by making their employers provide water, cooling off periods, and medical attention failed again. Farm workers are obviously the most impacted, but it's not just farm workers, it's landscape workers and roofers, and so many people work outside. So that did not make it again this year. Again this year also, the implementation of the recommendations of the Blue-Green Algae Task Force did not live. It died on Senate Bill 832. The governor creates these task forces and brings these smart scientists on them, and then the state, the legislature, and the DEP completely ignores what they say. It is what we call serious greenwashing by the DeSantis administration. We'll talk about it, but we won't do anything about it. And then another one that is a couple two that are a shame. The bill SB620 actually would have studied brownfield sites or kind of toxic sites and already closed landfill sites to determine or identify locations for redevelopment as solar photovoltaic facilities. So those big utility solar array fields, that died. And then a bill to protect endangered and threatened species died also. So those are just some of the good bills that died. But the moral of the story is, let's try to get Governor DeSantis to veto those two bad bills, the net metering bill, HB 741, and the Local Business Protection Act, SB 620.
Awesome. Well, listen, I know it can be overwhelming. There's so much going on, but I think you're right. You compartmentalize kind of your goals, and then you mobilize and target the ones that are most pressing, kind of, with a deadline closing in on you. And then, what I always try to say is, if you don't like something, just call your representatives anyway and just vent on their voicemails, vent on your emails, and just say, I don't appreciate that this, and this either happened or is in the process of happening. It's all public record. It's all archived. And I think the more that you're in their face about something, the better. And then if there are particular businesses that are spearheading some of these things, like utility companies or different sugar companies that are behind some of this verbiage, like call and email them too, and it stinks that we as residents have to not only pay taxes because we think that the government is going to use them for our quality of life to improve, but we also have to spend our time trying to fight private interests that are basically funding the campaign contributions of some of our representatives who choose not to listen to their constituents. And so it is a battle until we take money out of politics. I think we're going to have to keep fighting. But for now, these are the things ahead of us. And it's an election year, baby. I say that every single virtual office hour. It is time for you to check your voter registration. It's time to make sure that every person over the age of 18 knows that it's an election year, and that every single election from the local municipal level all the way up to the federal level has to be paid attention to. Find people who know what they're talking about, who are going to be doing endorsements soon and debates and vetting these candidates to make sure that they're not taking developer or sugar money or fossil fuel money. And that's what democracy is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a verb. We're supposed to have a hand in it and engage in it. So
amen.
In closing, did you have any if you want to close out of your screen so that they can see your face a little better, did you have any call to actions, visit your website, any websites that you wanted to highlight?
Sure. There are two websites. One is the No Roads to Ruin website. Two websites that are really full of lots of information. And the other website is our stopsugarburning.org, our Stop Pre-Harvest Sugar Field Burning campaign. I didn't get a chance to spell that work out, but it is national news. We've gotten a lot of national coverage on that campaign. It is from beginning to end an environmental justice campaign. People, if you're interested in environmental justice and big sugar politics, I suggest you go to that website for a lot of good information. I would close out by saying our strength is in numbers, pure and simple. It's a numbers game. As you were saying, speak up. Join whatever organization. If Sierra Club isn't your thing, join some other organization, but join an organization and be a part of the collective. We're in this together. We will sink or swim. We're going to do it together. And so be a part of it. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You just have to care and have a little bit of time and a little bit of attention. So I thank everybody who's listened today, and I look forward to continue to be in the ring and keep on swinging.
Awesome. Thank you so much for making the time and for being an environmental champion and for inspiring all of us and your great work, and that an individual person can have a huge difference. Imagine if every single one of us worked as hard as you did and followed these issues and picked up the phone and bothered our representatives. I think we would have a completely different process. I feel like apathy is one of the things we're also battling. And so thank you so much for your hard work. I really appreciate you.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. So please tune in. If you have any questions, feel free to email district1@ocfl.net. We will be sharing a lot of these resources throughout the next week and highlighting everything that was talked about here and more. And we look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Bye.